as well. And while we're waiting, I'd love to hear where everyone is calling in from, especially if you're a California voter. Let us know where you will be voting and rejecting the recall. Right, I see some voter in the Netherlands, few voters in the Netherlands, excellent. We are now live on Facebook. And while we're live, I would just take this opportunity to kick off this webinar and thank everyone for joining today. We're gonna get started now, and we really appreciate everyone joining us to find out why voting no on the California recall is so important. Before we do that, we have a very special message from the DNC chairman, Jaime Harrison. We'll get started with that and hear right from the source why we need to be voting in this recall election.
Hello, folks. It's Jaime Harrison, chair of the DNC. It's always a joy to talk with Democrats living all around the world. In 2020, Democrats abroad helped us make history. With your support, we won the White House. We flipped the U.S. Senate and elected Democrats at every level all across the country. My friends, we've got another important election coming up in California. We need to fend off this Republican power grab and make sure that Governor Newsom stays in office. Under Governor Newsom's leadership, California has been a leader in beating back this pandemic and implementing President Biden's Build Back Better agenda. We can't let a far-right Republican replace him and undo all of that hard work. Folks, if you're registered to vote in California, vote no on question 1 and make sure you return your ballot by September 14th. If you know folks who are in California, if you know California voters, make sure that they do the same. Together, we can make sure that Democrats like Governor Newsom can continue to deliver for the people of California. Thank you all again for having me, and thank you for everything you do for the Democratic Party.
Thank you, Chair Harrison. Well, folks, that is just the beginning. We have a great event lined up for you today. Again, why you can find out why voting no on the California recall is so important. I'd like to welcome you again. My name is Candace Karistan, and I am the International Chair of Democrats Abroad. Today, we're going to be hearing from 2 people on the ground in California to find out how it's going. Lizzie Heyboer of the California Democratic Party and California DNC member and Santa Clara County Supervisor, Otto Lee. Their remarks will be followed by a question and answer session. I'm also joined today by several California voters who organized this webinar. Democrats Abroad DNC Representative Martha McDevitt-Pugh of Democrats Abroad Netherlands, and Inge Kentrup, DA UK DPCA voting representative. The DPCA is the Democratic Party Committee Abroad, the official name for Democrats Abroad. And I'm also joined by 2 members of our California state team, Asha Subas, who is based in the United Kingdom, and Anelika Andrade, who is the vice chair of Democrats Abroad, Belgium. We're also joined by a voting assistance team. Bob Breger and Ellie Wallace are on the line to answer any voting questions that you may have. Please stay on through the end of the call so you can find out more about the ballot and get any questions answered that you may have. If you have voting questions already, you can write to info@democratsabroad.org. Again, that is info@democratsabroad.org to get voting assistance after this call. With that, I'd like to hand the mic over to Inge, again, our DA UK voting representative, to introduce our first speaker.
Thanks, Candace. It is my honor to introduce to you Lizzie Heyboer, who is the California Democratic Party's organizing director. Lizzie most recently led organizing efforts for Joe Biden's campaign in California for the general election last year. During the 2020 primaries, she joined Elizabeth Warren's presidential campaign, training volunteers and staff on how to build grassroots organizing power across 15 key states. Prior to 2020, Lizzie worked with Next Gen America as the national training director focused on youth organizing. While at Next Gen, she trained and developed young organizers and volunteers. Lizzie is leading the California Democratic Party efforts to vote no on the recall, and we're really looking forward to hearing what she has to say about this important election. Please join us in welcoming Lizzie Heyboer. Lizzie, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Very, very happy to be here. Thank you for joining from whatever time zone that you are in. Appreciate you taking the time out of your day to do this. I'm calling from California, obviously, I'm not abroad, but again, appreciate y'all organizing this so that we can talk a little bit more about the recall. This is truly one of the most important elections for Californians. You know, I feel like folks say this quite a bit, but you know, the eyes of the nation are on California right now. This is a very important election where really what we decide will sort of set a tone for the next year of work and into 2022. So it is incredibly important that we stay engaged and don't disengage after 2020 and think, oh, it's all okay and we don't have to do any work. We still have to stay involved and stay present. And really this is, again, an important election. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about what a recall is, because I certainly learned quite a bit in the past few months working on this. So I'm sure that many folks have questions. But before I get into that, I just want to talk a little bit about how this recall started so that you kind of have a better understanding of where this is coming from and who are the folks behind this recall. So first off, the folks have been trying all of the time. They try to recall whoever's the current governor here in California. It's not a new practice. Folks try this very often. You know, they'll mount a petition, collect signatures, but rarely does it pass. There's only been one other time that a recall has actually been, a petition has been successful, which was in 2003 with Governor Gray Davis. And as a result of that election, we ended up in California with Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger. And a lot of folks, I'm sure, remember how that was. So the Republicans running now are very, very different than Schwarzenegger. I'll say that. So it's even more scary now. But when we look back at that, that election really changed things for California, and it put us in a period where we weren't able to move forward in the ways that we really need to. And we're in that crucial period now again. And so 6 times before in the past 2 years, 6 times before, Governor Newsom has been a recall petition has been circulated 6 times. It's never qualified. This last time it did. And part of the reason why that happened is back in November of 2020 was the deadline when folks who wanted to recall the governor were circulating their petitions. That was their signature deadline. They received an extension from a judge saying like, hey, you know what? COVID's going on. You have more time to collect signatures now because we don't think that you were able to do it normally. So they received an extension until March 2021. And with that extension, before in November 2020, they didn't have enough. But in March 2021, with the extension, they were able to gather enough signatures. A little bit about how the recall works here in California. We have the lowest threshold of any state that is needed to collect signatures. So only 12% of the folks who've previously voted need to actually have a signature. So that's about roughly 1.5 million this year was all that was needed in a state of 40 million people with about 20 million who are voting age. So 20 million people and only 1.5 million had to sign a petition to say, we want to recall the governor. And so that resulted in where we are now. And what we're seeing is that it's going to cost the state close to $300 million to run this election. And that is during COVID recovery. And sure, we have a budget surplus, things are great, that's awesome, but $300 million is $300 million. So what we could do with that money is, it's truly sad that we had to have this. And so here we are in this process now, working and dealing with the recall. So let me talk a little bit about what the ballot looks like, because this is quite common. Folks have a lot of questions about this. And so there are two questions on the ballot. It is not something that folks are used to. There's two questions. The first question asks voters, how should the governor be recalled? Should Governor Newsom be recalled, removed from office? And we'll say in parentheses. And then the second question says, if he is recalled, who should replace him? And the first question, all that's required is a simple majority in order for that to pass. So if enough folks vote yes on the recall, which also let's talk about how confusing that is. We're used to saying yes to things when we want to support them. And in this case, if you want to support the governor, you're saying no, which is very confusing for many voters. So that requires a simple majority. Over 50% of voters have to say, we want to recall the governor, and it would pass. But this is where things get scary. So the second question does not require a majority. It just requires a plurality. So what this means is that between the 46 candidates who are on the ballot, if the recall were to pass, one of those 46 candidates would become governor, but they don't need over 50% to become governor. They could feasibly, and this will happen because of how many folks are on this ballot, they could have 30%, they could have 20%, to be honest, if it got split up that much. And that person could have the most out of everyone else, and they would become the governor. And so what we're seeing right now is if the recall were to pass, the leading person in that replacement is Larry Elder, who is absolutely, as many folks, if you read the news, he's absolutely terrible. He's been speaking about how minimum wage should be zero, how women shouldn't be involved in politics. He's just been saying awful things, and he is not the kind of person that he's honestly pretty far right. I would say almost further right than Trump sometimes on certain things. And so that where we are right now, even though whoever replaces the governor would be only in office until next year, that's long enough, right? That's long enough. That's a year. And that's long enough where we could see a lot of damage done here in the state of California, especially, again, just reiterating that, we're still recovering from COVID with the economy reopening here, and we are definitely not out of the woods when it comes to COVID either. And so imagine if we had someone who didn't believe in a mask mandate and didn't think vaccines needed to happen, it would be absolutely terrible. And so that is why we're really focused on answering that first question, because the whole point of this is if the first question doesn't pass, we don't have to care about it the second question. So if we can just focus our energies and say, vote no and go, that's it. That's all you have to do. It's the easiest ballot I filled out. I filled mine out 2 days ago, and I just didn't even flip it over. I just filled out the first part and then wrapped it up in my envelope and mailed it. It was very easy. And so what we can focus on is our energy on that first question, because frankly, there's no replacement candidate. There's no backup option. Governor Newsom is our main option. And the way to keep him in office is to vote no on the recall, and that is it. A lot of folks have confusion and think that they can write him in the second question. And I just want to let you know that that is not an option. If it wouldn't void your ballot in any way, it just wouldn't get counted, because the assumption is if you want to keep him in office, that is the first question. So that is the main thing that we're focused on. And another reason, just, to give some context to this, is a lot of folks learned their lesson back from 2003, where Democrats were like, hey, we have a backup candidate. And it actually ended up confusing voters even more, because then they thought, well, maybe I should just vote yes on the recall, and then we'll get this backup person in. But in reality, in these kind of elections, Republicans are infinitely more motivated to turn out than Democrats. And so with that being the case, if enough folks vote yes, those replacement candidates, it's 90%, 99% positive we would end up with a Republican and not a backup Democrat. So that's where we need to really focus our efforts again on just voting no on the recall and getting Democrats to turn out and turn in their ballot. This is really truly an election focused on turnout. So from someone who works on organizing all of the time, it's very different. We're not trying to sway people, because here in California, we really have the advantage. We have a registration advantage with 10 million Democrats. So we know that if we can get enough of those folks out, that we don't even have to worry about all of the other people, someone called it the clown car on the back of the ballot. We don't have to worry about the clown car. We can focus on what we need to do to move through COVID. So we can just get that first question defeated and we're good to go. So what I will say is all you need to do is 1, turn your ballot in. which I know you know, but please do this. September 14th is the election deadline. So make sure that you turn your ballot in. And beyond that, the best thing that you can do, because this is a turnout election, is be sure to talk to your friends and family about this. If you're outside of California, talk to your friends and family who live in California, who you know, maybe they just don't know. This is a weird election. It's happening. A lot of folks that we're finding on the phone don't know it's happening in September. They think it's November because that's when we're used to voting. So if you can take the time to reach out to some of your friends and family who are California voters and make sure that they know they have to vote by September 14th, because this is incredibly important. So that is the best thing that you can do with your time right now. Because again, like I said at the beginning, the eyes of this whole country are on California. And if we frankly mess this up, it's going to be really big ramifications. And all of the work that we put in 2020 to get Joe Biden elected and to turn the House and the Senate and all of these places where we have really frankly up the power would be at risk. And so this is incredibly one of the most important things you could be doing with your time. So with that, make sure you turn your ballot in and talk to your friends and family. And I will answer questions I know at the end when we have some Q&A. So with that, I will toss it back to our hosts.
Thank you, Lizzie. It's really great to hear that, just to find out about how this has come through. It really seems like it's trying to get in power from the Republicans by the back door. Just was curious about the turnout efforts of the California Democratic Party. We're obviously focused on that as well. Was wondering, are there particular groups you're targeting that you're trying to particularly make sure turn out? Young people, Latinx, that kind of thing. Just curious what's going on with that a bit.
Yeah, you nailed it. So, we've been working. One thing I'll just mention that's really been unique about this campaign in general. So the first question on the ballot is, this is something I learned, it's considered a ballot measure, which means that the rules and how we coordinate with all of our partners across the state are much more relaxed in a way. We're able to coordinate more widely, which allows, with just this short amount of time, allows us all, not just the state party, but also our labor partners and our environmental groups and all of the different groups that we have here and partners in the state to really come together and have a coordinated effort. And it's going to be one of the largest coordinated efforts that the state has ever seen, which is amazing. And so with that, we're able to be very closely aligned with what the campaign is doing and get the best data and the best information. And what they've found is that the folks that we know need to turn out, obviously, the folks who are low propensity voters, right? The people who just turn out every 4 years for the general election, if that, and who, don't necessarily pay attention to what's going on, the ones who think it's in November. And so underneath that all, that tends to lean towards young people. We find that folks, as each 10-year gap that you move up, it becomes more likely that they're going to vote. So they've been seeing that folks under the age of 30 are kind of on the lower end of folks who need to vote. So we're focused on engaging with young voters. We also are noticing that there are a lot of folks in the Latinx community, as you mentioned, as well as just, the socioeconomic status. We find that voters who are on the lower end of socioeconomic status don't necessarily turn out as much. So that's why we're focused right now over the next last 16 days now. We've been phone banking and making phone calls to voters, but we're also really increasing our door-to-door efforts because a lot of folks are busy and they don't answer the phone. But we can knock their door and talk to them and do it in a safe way where those face-to-face conversations ensure that we're turning them out. And we're focused those on our main target communities. And just to kind of reiterate, so because it's about large turnout and a turnout for Democrats, usually we try to go to swing districts, right? We're all used to going to the swing district to go turn out voters. Well, it's kind of odd, right? I live in San Francisco and I've been talking to our folks here, and it's weird. We get to actually call San Francisco voters for once because it really matters. It's a numbers game statewide. So if we can get all the San Francisco voters who are blue and all the LA voters in those big hubs where we have folks to turn out, it's really to our advantage. So we are also focused on the areas where we know we have strong blue pockets. And then within that, getting those voters who are less likely to turn out to actually show up.
Thank you for that. And we're very keen also of turnout. And unfortunately, we can't knock on doors always as easily, but we appreciate that you can do that. I would like to turn over, first of all, to mention there is a Q&A box. If you have a question for Lizzie or for Otto, and we'll have some additional questions, please put that in the Q&A box. I'm going to turn over now to Martha McDevitt-Pugh, who will introduce Otto Lee.
Great, thank you, Inga. It's my honor to introduce Santa Clara County Supervisor Otto Lee. Otto Lee immigrated from Hong Kong to Berkeley, where he attended high school and college. He resides with his wife, Sally, and their 3 daughters in Sunnyvale, where he served on the Planning Commission and was later elected as council member, vice mayor, and mayor. Otto also served and retired from the U.S. Navy Reserves after 28 years as a commander. He was deployed to Baghdad, Iraq, and served as chief of Drawdown Material Disposition Policy. He helped close over 200 bases and was awarded the Bronze Star. And upon returning from Baghdad, he ran against a then relatively unknown Representative Devin Nunes in the Central Valley in an R+13 district. Otto received the highest Democratic vote count against Nunes in CA 22 until then. And he's working hard to help retire Nunes and many of his Republican colleagues in Congress in California and throughout the country. He's currently the only elected DNC member from Silicon Valley in California. He serves as one of the 5 county supervisors in Santa Clara County. And after receiving his bachelor's in chemical and nuclear engineering from UC Berkeley and his JD from UC Hastings, Otto attended the University of Leiden in the Netherlands, where he received his LLM in public international law. And so like us, he's been an American abroad. Please join me in welcoming Otto Lee. And Otto, please go ahead.
Thank you so much, Martha. It's truly an honor to be speaking with all of you. In case you see what my shirt says, today is our Pride March, all for love, love for all. So just celebrating that here. Yeah, so thanks so much for the warm introduction and having me speak. Lizzie, that's just a great job and cover the background of the recall. And as we all could see, that this recall kind of started as a whim. They've been doing it all the time in the Republican Party. But this one, due to the fact that there's this COVID, and they were able to gather a lot of people who've been upset because of the vaccine and whatnot. And so that's how they were able to, with the extension of the judge to get those signatures required. At the end of the day, right now, we're not talking about persuasion. Don't try to persuade somebody to vote one way. At this point, we're just basically saying turnout really is the most important thing. And September 14th is the date. Obviously, you can still mail it in, but if you expect that there's some mail issues, there's also other ways that you could fax in your ballot, or you can do the email to fax. So there are many ways you could actually get it in. I just want to talk a little bit about also the process itself, right? All you have to do is check no on question number 1. It's as simple as that. And there are people who've asked me, well, in case, who should I vote for on the second page? Well, on the question that was just asked earlier by, I see Julian Becker from UK. It's like, why are all the candidates on the replacement ballot a complete joke at best, right? I mean, you see names like Caitlyn Jenner, there's Angeline, who's I guess is an adult entertainer and whatnot. Yes, they are kind of a joke in a way, and why there are no real prominent Democrats running it, because we tried this before, right? Back in the days when Governor Davis was being recalled, we tried to put the Lieutenant Governor, then Chris Bustamante, on the second page, and really was somewhat confusing and divided the attention. And that certainly did not help the cause. So this time around, we are going to give a very unified message and basically saying, like, don't bother the second page. These are all jokes, not to worry about it. And Democrats are united on this. As Lizzie mentioned about Larry Elder, this is somebody who was a talk show host, extremely conservative, and somebody that absolutely is not qualified. I mean, you could talk. I mean, First Amendment allow you to do that, but to be a talk show host with certainly no experience, and especially political leaning and whatnot, that fits California. So it's absolutely not a acceptable alternative here. Now, in terms of recalls right now, this is not actually the only recall that's going on. Apparently, there's a lot of folks who want to recall school board members, including myself as a supervisor. I just got a recall on my entire board, all 5 of us. The San Jose City Council is now also being recalled because of the vax mandate that they have passed to make sure people get the vaccine in order to enter the city facilities. So there are so many of these different recalls going on. This is just the start. So this is actually very impactful, because if there's any way that this recall passes, or even close to passing, is going to encourage all these other grassroots type trying to basically throw chaos into a democratically elected system. I mean, after all, California is like the 7th largest economy of the world on itself. if we have this thing passing, I would be able to tell you that the stock market will be affected. So this is very serious. The threat is very real. And one thing that's kind of behind that's off for us is that we always know that other than the general elections that we expect, when you have this election at odd times, the turnout tends to be very, very low. And the way we could lose this thing is by low turnout. So that's why we keep talking about the word turnout and how important it is to get that envelope filled in and send it in. I put on my page earlier just to emphasize the point. That's what the ballot looks like. If you have received it, here's the question. And it's just yes, see, or no, no. As simple as just fill in the bubble of no, fold it up, put it in your envelope. That's all you need to do if you're going to mail it in. Now, if you mail in, a couple of things here I want to remind people, which is very easy to forget. There's two things. Number one, you've got to sign the box by X. Otherwise, it won't count. Second thing is there's a date in there too. So please fill in the date and that. If you're going to mail in ASAP. Now, as you know, it says no postage required in the United States. The problem is if you're mailing from elsewhere, I believe you might need to put your postage in it. So I just want to make sure that doesn't apply to you and say no postage, okay? You might not get counted, number one. Number two is to be sure, fax is definitely way faster to get in, and the instruction is also in the ballot. Now, for those you know that, oh, wait, I haven't got registered yet, or for whatever reason you did not get a ballot, and so registration deadline is tomorrow. And you could register online. You can still register online. So please, if you still need to get registered, there's still time to do it. And remember, you guys are ahead of us by a few hours, and we're using U.S. times. So you actually have a few more hours, more. So if you still need to get registered, please do that ASAP. Okay. All right. The message is so clear. It's just as simple as like just say no. In this case, and I certainly want to open up for any further questions, but I really do think that keeping the message simple is important, and two is really focusing on collecting. Your biggest role you can do is talk to your family members, anybody you know that may be at school, they might not be paying attention to this. Make sure they got the envelope, fill it in, and get it sent in. That's the best thing you can do for everybody. And again, thank you for all your great work for Democrats Abroad.
Thanks so much, Otto. And, we voters abroad have one advantage, is we get our ballots really early. We got them like a few weeks ago. That's the good news, but it's also the bad news. And I think some of our voters out there may be getting email ballots. That's something we all turned to during the pandemic, was to be sure we got our ballots on time. And it can get stuck in your spam box, or it can be sitting in your email queue. And it can be like, I'll do that next week. I know I did mine yesterday. So I could be able to speak to it in this call. And you know what? I did almost forget to put the date next to my signature. The fax form is a little bit different, but thanks for highlighting that. I think that's really terrific. And I know that I am certainly, as we speak, writing a list of my friends and family in California so that I can ping them all. My sister did tell me she already voted, so that's all really good news. I'm just wondering, Otto, could you tell us a little bit kind of more about what the feeling on the ground is in California, and how people are they talking about this election? Because of course we don't get it in our media here in the news. So what's the feeling?
One thing about Democrats, a lot of times we also realize certain ethnic community especially tends to vote very late. And that certainly causes us concern, right? Because you don't wait till the last minute. Now, the good news I could tell you is that based on the early receiving ballot, like the early ballots that's coming in, tends to lean Democrats. Like the more Democrats clearly is returning the ballots, and that certainly is a very good sign. But again, at the end of the day, it really is about turnout. We know that there's a very loud minority that is advocating for the recall. They're certainly very loud on social media and all that, but we certainly do see that people, I would say maybe a month ago, wasn't as concerned. The dinner conversations in the last few days or so, you could really see people getting excited or nervous, right? And in some cases, I almost felt that that's a good sign, because as we recall back in 2016, when you hear people thought, oh, Hillary's got this in the bag, and then that does not encourage people to bother to vote, right? So in this case, the fact that people are nervous, like, oh my God, we need to get this in, and so I think that actually potentially is a good sign.
Yeah, that's really good. I know some of us are old enough to remember 2003. And for me personally, I was working on LGBT immigration rights and on marriage equality, and Governor Schwarzenegger vetoed the marriage bill that was passed twice by the California legislature. So that was then. And I think we've already highlighted some of the other consequences this time. So that urgency is really so important. I think we have some other questions that came in advance from some of our members. And I think Asha was going to ask the next question. Asha, do you want to take that question?
Sure, yeah, I can do that. Some legal scholars have questioned the constitutionality of the recall, saying it violates democratic small d principles. Do you think that this approach is fruitful? I know there was an op-ed about this in the New York Times, I believe.
I can jump in. So frankly, with 2 weeks until the election, we're pretty far down the line already at this point. So we're kind of stuck with what we have to do. So that's kind of the way that I think we're approaching it. I'm fully focused on just getting through to September 14th and ensuring that we can defeat it. And then I think that there is a lot of conversations to be had after the recall actually finishes and we get through this of what does this process look like in California? How does it compare to other states? One thing I didn't mention is that in a lot of other states, if you are mounting a recall against someone, there's like a list of valid concerns that you can, you have to have like a proven negligence by said person to actually get them recalled or to even trigger a recall election. There's also changes that can be made to the law itself just for about the way that the election is run, so that it makes it less confusing. There's lots of little things that can be done to improve the process. But I think that, this has California back in the early 1900s was the first state to actually implement recalls. So which is an interesting thing that I remember learning in college and then forgot about. So I'm glad I learned it at some point. But I think that, and I'm no lawyer, I'm not a constitutional scholar, so I don't want to speak to this in a way that's incorrect, but from the just full organizing perspective, at this point, we just have 2 weeks. And I think that, there are smarter people than me who are probably working on that and figuring out a way to mount that sort of defense and say, hey, maybe we can revisit this. But at this point, my goal is to say, let's just vote no, because if we can show people if we can get that turnout up between 40 to 60%, right? If we can get people to show up and vote this down, then it wouldn't even matter. We don't even need to worry about that. I think that the main thing here is we want to show folks as well that this isn't like, if you kind of mess with us, we're going to show up and we're going to vote this down because this is not a valid thing to pursue, that it's not going to work. We're not going to be asleep. We're going to stay engaged. And so that's kind of the way that I'm approaching it. I think that there's much to be done for folks afterwards to kind of revisit what this process looks like. But at this point, we're so far along that, from the state party perspective, at least, we're just focused on getting through the election and making sure that we get folks turned out.
Thank you. Otto, anything to add there? You are a lawyer.
Yeah, thank you. No, the constitutionality, certainly, I think it's a good academic discussion, but I really don't think that would survive a court challenge now, the fact that we have had quite a few different recalls that has taken place in California. So it would be a change of the law or our constitution, the California constitution, before anything like that. Because certainly not every state has this recall process, and we certainly couldn't have recalled Donald Trump either, because that's not the federal process of getting rid of a president. You have to impeach, right? So it's really a California thing. It's a state-by-state issue, but that's a much longer-term discussion in the future to change the California constitution.
Okay. I think we had one other question in the panelist Q&A. And, one of the things that Democrats Abroad is really focused on, because there are so many study abroad programs around the world, is reaching out to university students. And there was a question about how are young people reached at university and how they're targeted online, because a lot of the classes are online. I don't know, Lizzie, if there's any special strategy there around outreach to students, or Otto, if you know about that.
I mean, I can speak, I've worked with young people in the past and on youth organizing, so I can speak to sort of general best practices on engaging with young folks. One of the things we know is that a phone call doesn't necessarily work for a young person. I'm certainly still luckily in the young person bucket. And I know that I don't, well, I answer my phone a lot now because I do get random phone calls, but before this job, I definitely did not answer an unknown number and I would just let it go to voicemail. And so we know that for young folks, that is definitely the case. And, you know, good organizing is all about meeting someone where they're at. Right. And where do young people spend a lot of their time? One, they're on their phones. So that's why the recall campaign specifically has been running a large texting program for many, many months now, which is a key way to get engaged with young folks because texting is easier. They'll respond that way. The other thing we know, and you mentioned this, right? A lot of young people, especially college age students, are very mobile. If they're not studying abroad, they're moving to a different apartment, they're moving around, and they're very hard to get them in mail, via mail, sending them a mail piece. It's hard sometimes to, as I mentioned, to get them on the phone and even knocking their door. They might not update their address. So you're like, I don't know where this person is. So that's why really texting and any online engagement that we can do is really the way to meet young people where they are. So that's why, all we here in, and this is something I'm very excited about. So one of the things that we are doing here in the state is relational organizing, which is friend-to-friend outreach, which is exactly what I was talking to you about. You all can't use this app because you're not in the US, but there is an app that we're using to do this. But the best you could do is just engage with those folks online and sending, Facebook messages. But we use an app called Outreach Circle, which actually allows folks to scan their contacts, send messages to those folks that are registered Democrats or lean Democrats or some of our independents, and actually send them individualized text messages with a survey in it. That is exactly the kind of survey that you would have if you were knocking someone's door or you were, giving them a phone call or even sending them a cold text message. But what we know statistically is that friends and family outreach is 5 to 10 times more effective than even knocking someone's door or making a phone call. And so what that allows us to do using this tool Outreach Circle is that actually, if we can get all of our friends and family to engage on an app like this, it actually cleans out our list of the folks that we know are going to hear from someone and allows us to be super efficient with our resources so that we're engaging just with the people that we know are not going to hear from someone that they know. They might be the lone blue thumb in the middle of the sea of red, and they need to have a phone call from a volunteer because that's the only Democrat that they might hear from, right? So we really are able, especially with such a short turnaround for this election, we were given really a month and a half. So this is a tool that I think specifically also applies to young people because young people, again, are more distrustful of a lot of the institutions that we have, and they're distrustful of random texts from people even. So if we can get young folks to engage with their friends and family in relational organizing, it actually has a bigger impact. So that's where I would say it's kind of a ripple effect. And, we're not always able to track everything, and it is what it is, but that's okay. But the important part is that if we encourage young people to do this, so what I would say to you all is if you have folks, as you mentioned, study abroad students, people who are abroad, help them, give them some tools, some messages, some ways to talk to their fellow study abroad students to really help them understand the importance of this, that they can just quick send those Facebook messages, TikTok messages. I don't use TikTok, but I don't know what you do in there. So they can send messages to people and get in touch with them that way, because again, this is turnout. And so if we can just create that ripple effect, I think it will be the most effective.
Yeah, Lizzie, I completely agree. And I've used Outreach Circle too on my own race for supervisor. It's really powerful because it is about the friends and family outreach, because what we are actually able to reach is each individual's phone book, right, of all the phone numbers. And so those numbers, of course, are far more accurate than the database that we have. So it refreshes it, number one. And two is, as we know, the outreach in terms of even knocking on doors or phone dialing is far, far slower. When you're texting, you could text literally, hundreds of phone number a minute, right? And that's what we've learned from various campaigns. And the texting has been extremely active. I certainly have received texts before my ballot arrives asking to see, hey, have you received your ballot yet? As soon as my ballot arrives, like, hey, have you got it? You have any questions? Let us know. Make sure you vote no, right? And then a few days later, it's like, hey, we noticed you haven't returned your ballot yet. Like, have you voted yet? So it tracks. And of course, the sooner you mail your ballot in, then the texting will stop, because we know that that ballot has been received, and we'll focus our efforts to those who have not turned in the ballot. So the texting program clearly is very, very effective and it's working well. The other thing I want to mention too is about the TV ads. Of course, a lot of money is going to TV, and TV, of course, is expensive. But at the same time, it's effective because it does reach so many people and keep reminding people that, hey, that ballot's been sitting there, you got to turn it in. So one ad that we see a lot is Elizabeth Warren is out there talking about this, right? So you don't see Elizabeth Warren very often in California. In this case, you see her talking about how important it is to vote no on and it clearly targets progressives and young progressives as well, as we know how many young progressives have supported Senator Warren. So these are definitely the efforts that's been going on. Lizzie, I'm still waiting to see the exciting other ads that will be coming through, but the next 2.5 weeks, I'm sure we'll see a lot of those ads on TV. So really looking forward to it.
Great. I think that's so interesting for us to hear about how the organizing is happening in California, and also useful use for us as we look forward to using, to looking at the tooling that we're going to be using going forward. So thank you so much for both of you for giving us insight into that. We have a lot of other questions that came in, but they're very kind of nitty-gritty voter assistance questions for people abroad. So you two are very welcome to stay for that, but I think we're going to jump into our voter assistance section, and I'll hand over to Candace. But anyway, thank you very much for me. Candace?
Great. Thank you, Martha. And again, thank you, Lizzie, and thank you, Otto, for sharing all of that information on the ground. It is incredibly motivating. I'm a Pennsylvania voter. If I could vote in California, I would certainly be voting no. And thank you so much for, again, sharing your expertise and all that you're doing for the California Democratic Party back in the States. So as Martha mentioned, we are going to turn now to some voter assistance questions. And we have two people on the line, Bob of the Netherlands and Ellie of Ecuador, who are going to run us through some frequently asked questions that you might be having yourself as a California voter at this time. Martha, you want to walk people through this, or
yeah, well, first of all, I want to mention that that people can also put their questions into the text box. And of course, we already mentioned the email address that you can send your questions to, because we have volunteers that are able to answer questions that come in from our Democrats Abroad and from our votefromabroad.org site. But I will actually defer to Bob and Ellie if they could answer the questions that came in, and there's 4 of those. And the first one is, what do I do if I did not receive a ballot?
So is this for Bob or for Ellie? We need to.
Bob, go for it.
Well, here's the thing. You can't vote a ballot if you didn't get it. And if you're correctly registered in California, you should have gotten it because they sent them out weeks ago. So the first thing you do, and they sent them by email if that's the way you're requesting it. So really, really, really look in your computer and make sure you didn't get it. Look in your spam filter, take the thing out and shake it. I don't care what you do, but look in your computer to see if you got it. If you really didn't get it, then we have a nifty link that we're going to send you that I'm going to post here in the chat box. This is holy. Gotta look at this. Vote from abroad is so cool. If you are not registered, it tells you how to get registered. If you're not sure if you're registered, it tells you how to check. So votefromabroad.org, votefromabroad.org/states/CA for California is your ticket. It puts you into the California state system, and you then go to the county, because elections are managed by counties in California, and go to the county at which you believe you're registered and go into their website and see if you're registered correctly. And if you're registered correctly, your ballot should be there waiting for you on the website, and you can download it. If you do not see yourself registered correctly, then you need to re-register yourself on an emergency basis by tomorrow night. This is really important. And the way to do it is to go back to votefromabroad.org, push the big red button, and fill out something called an FPCA, which stands for Federal Postcard Application, because in an earlier century, it was actually a postcard. We don't like to change things too fast. So it's the Federal Postcard Application, and get that thing in today. So that's my answer to the question.
Great. Thanks, Bob. Couldn't have said it better myself. The next question, well, it's about the deadline, which I think we've already said it's September 14th, 8 p.m. Pacific. But Ellie, would you like to take that one? How do I return my ballot?
Sure, absolutely. Well, luckily for people in Latin America or any country who doesn't have mail service, we have been provided the option of fax. Now, most of us don't have a fax machine, so you can do what we call email to fax. In other words, you will fill out your ballot, fill out all your corresponding paperwork that comes with it. And we do advise you to look very carefully. Each county can have different places where you need to sign to validate your ballot. So you want to take all the pieces that were sent to you. Most of them have an oath page as well as the ballot. So you'll need to carefully sign those. And then you could, if you do have a printer, you can scan them in to your computer, save it in a PDF file, and attach it to an email. Now, you can use any fax service. All you have to do is Google free fax, and you'll have more places than you would ever imagine. But we do have provided for us by the government a specific form, and you just have to fill that form out, and then you send it or scan it along with your paperwork and email it to the government email site, and they scan it and send it on to California. So
where is that government email site? Where can they find that?
Well, they'll need to find it to also download the file. It's an FBAP.org file. And then when you get to the site, just ask for the fax cover sheet. It's called a cover sheet. And I don't have the link right at hand. I do have a copy of the fax sheet here on my desktop, but
I'm going to send it to you.
Yeah, I think that's really, I'm glad you mentioned that, Ellie, because I also got in touch with Kendra Borgen, who's the head of voter assistance. And she just reminded me also that the FEAP site is a good one. It's something that we've also recommended in the past. If you go to FEAP, you'll find that there. But she also noted that there's sometimes up to a 2-day delay with that, especially when it's busy. Now, of course, in 2020 in November, it was very busy. But it's also possible that with this recall election, happen as well.
And I tell you, the good thing about them, as opposed to maybe another fax site, is you can email them back and check on them, because I have done that for voters, and they will respond that they have faxed it. They can't guarantee that the fax arrives, but they can tell you for sure it's been sent, which with some of their services, you don't have that ability.
So
I just put the link in the chat box to the FEAP.
Oh, good. Yeah,
always.
Absolutely.
There's also a cool one called fax.plus that seems to work okay.
Yeah, and that one, I had to help a friend who had medical records to send to their doctor, and it worked beautifully. most of them are all very good, but
Yeah.
the Gov one, I don't know. I just think you have a little extra back door to check on. So,
Can I
but
just
that-
say one thing I noticed? I noticed that the oath is different for a fax submission in some counties.
right.
So you
Okay.
gotta swear correctly. Swearing is very important in America. So you gotta take the correct oath if you're faxing, and sometimes it's
Right.
different than the other oath. Make
That's
sure-
Right.
right. That's
Okay.
right.
Well,
On-
the-
on my ballot, there was a voter oath if I was going to mail it in, and a separate form
Right.
for the fax one. So it's really important to look at that.
That's
carefully.
why I say read every document. They are not all the same. Some require signatures in different places for different things. It's like read every word.
Great, terrific.
And we can walk you through it. Don't hesitate to call.
Yes, we have a fantastic voter assistance team. Great.
Yeah.
So the third question, Bob, if you could take that one. I've lived outside of the United States for the last 3 years, and I'm no longer a California resident. Can I still vote in a state election?
Yes, yes. You don't lose your rights as a US citizen by lingering abroad. You have whatever rights you had when you left, which varies from state to state, but whatever it was,
Right.
it continues.
Great. All right. And then the fourth question is, the deadline for registering for this election is tomorrow, August 30th. My daughter just turned 18. How can I get her registered?
Well, go now or a minute ago or a day ago and go to votefromabroad.org. That's as Bob said. He already explained it. You do fill out the FPCA form, which is the federal postcard application. Because when you fill out that form, you are also registering as well as asking for the ballot. So it covers your bases. Do it, email it. And I don't know, Bob, do you know? No, I know California does not accept registration via email, but you would be requesting your ballot. So fill that out, get it in before tomorrow.
Yeah, it's just get it in. I don't know if we have an upload directly to California voter registration. In some states, you
No.
just- is that
We-
right?
No, we don't. But as
Right.
Cuthbert, who's a fellow California team member, hi Cuthbert, he's put into, I don't think everyone can see the Q&A, but there is two very key websites for California. One is the Secretary of State registration status, and the other one is Where's My Ballot or Track Your Ballot website.
Right.
And both of them are super important. So thank you, Cuthbert, for that.
Yes, and I would also say on our website at votefromabroad.org, we have all of the resources you would need, like, am I registered? Where is my ballot? Track your ballot. Also shows you your sample ballot. It,
Very cool. It's very
and
cool.
it gives you the state page, and all of our links go to credible government websites, so you can trust what you read there.
But is there a link? We can walk you through it. Is there a link where they can contact us easily for help?
That would be
Well-
contact the voter assistance team at Democrats Abroad on votefromabroad.org. You'll see there's a little bubble where you can ask a question. Those bubbles come into our help desk tool, and those will get routed to the correct team. So if it's a voter assistance question, those will get routed, and the voter assistance team is going to be checking those over the coming couple of weeks before this election. And
Yeah. We'll be living by the computer,
you'll be
waiting
living
for
by
your
the computer.
question.
Love to hear that. And Inga just put into the chat, be sure to check Democrats Abroad, votefromabroad.org states
Right.
that link in their CA, because that will
Right.
also answer a lot of your questions. How do I check on my ballot? How
Yes.
do I register and all that?
All
So,
of that.
um,
They're great links.
Yeah, there is there's also a state website where you can check your where your registration, which is also now in the chat box, and the FVAP link for faxing your ballot. I'm unfortunately unable to copy and paste that for some reason.
I
in
put
there.
it there. I put it.
Yeah, yeah, but you only send it to the host and panelists, Bob. If you can put it in and send it to everyone, that'd be great.
Oh, Oh no, I did it wrong.
Yeah.
Oh,
You
how
pop
do
it
I
in there.
do that? All my beautiful stuff I've been uploading is wasted. Oh, hold on. So, so I know this is bad for my credibility if I can't.
Yeah, do a copy paste there, Bob. And there's just one more question that I saw come in from someone who says, I'm an overseas voter for over 20 years. Can I vote in the California governor recall election? It's not a federal election.
I'm putting,
Right.
I'm putting the wrong thing in. Hold on. Yes.
Well, California is a down ballot state, and they have, you have a right to vote for anybody in California, dog catcher even. So yes, definitely. Just if you aren't registered now through the, the regular system, go to our website, fill out that paper and get it in. And you should receive a ballot,
Okay.
but hurry by tomorrow.
Yeah. Now, do it right now.
Yeah. I mean,
Not after
I think the other answer to that question is if you've been sent a ballot, you can vote it.
Oh,
Yes,
yes,
yes.
definitely.
Never waste a ballot, ever. Vote it.
Yeah,
No.
and if you have any kind of questions like that, reach out, get in touch, talk to Democrats abroad, and we'll help out.
Yes. And if you do go to our help desk online, what happens is we personally get your email, and it gives us time to really research your question and give you the very best answer to help you vote, because that's our main goal. We haven't succeeded till you vote. So we're here to help.
You're here.
Yeah.
Thanks. Well, I don't see any other questions. I think we've answered all that we have incoming, but thank you both for joining, because it's always great to see the faces of those people behind the computers who are on our voter assistance team. So with that, I'll hand back to Candace.
Great. Thank you, Martha. Again, I just want to thank Lizzie and Otto for speaking to us on the ground. Really appreciate both of them taking the time to talk to us and hear all of our questions today. And we really are thrilled to see so many California voters joining who are ready to vote no. If you are a California voter tuning in and you have not voted yet, I'm urging you to vote no and to send your ballot back immediately. It has got to be returned by September 14th. They're in California by September 14th. If you haven't seen it yet, as Bob and Ellie just said, please do check your spam folder, your secondary inboxes, and get in touch with us at info@democratsabroad.org if you're having any problems. We talked about repetitive messaging, and I do want to ask our California Democrats Abroad members who are tuning in right now to check out the messages that you have been receiving from us. There's been a series of them, and I encourage you to find the most recent one from August 26th and let us know that you have voted by clicking the I voted button in that email. This will help us better target our work in the coming weeks, and it'll reduce the messages that you'll be getting from us. But I want to talk a little bit about what all of us can do right now, regardless of if we vote in California or not. And to go back to that relational organizing principle, I want you to take a moment right now and think, who else do you know from California who is living abroad? Let them know that resources are available at democratsabroad.org and votefromabroad.org. And please, please, please remind them to send back their ballot immediately. This is one of the perks of becoming a member of Democrats Abroad, getting this voter assistance. So if you're tuning in and you aren't already a member, I encourage you to join us today at democratsabroad.org/join.
You're here.
I also encourage you to follow us on social media. We have a Facebook page, both for Democrats Abroad and Vote From Abroad, Instagram as well. And last but not least, I encourage you to donate to our organization. We are a volunteer-run organization, primarily donation funded, and contributions from people like you really do help us cover our outreach costs to California voters in this important recall election. A donation of $20.21 can help us reach over 50 voters and provide funds for us to keep doing important voter information events like this one today. With that, we're going to be ending this call. Again, thank you to Lizzie and Otto, as well as to Asha, Inga, Martha, and Anelika from the Democrats Abroad California State Team, who did a lot of the heavy lifting for this event, and to Bob and Ellie for their voter assistance today. Last but not least, I'd like to thank you for taking the time to join us and vote no on September 14th. Thanks everyone, and have a good rest of your day.
Bye everybody.